All right, we're back to talk about this week and what we're going to be looking at for the sermon on Sunday. And of course, that's going to be our 14th part of our conversation about righteousness in Romans chapter 14. Romans 14 continues that trend from 12 and 13, where Paul is really talking about righteous living, what it means to be a righteous person. And of course, by righteousness, again, Paul is talking about covenant faithfulness, somebody who is part of the covenant people of God, part of God's family. And you can go back and kind of watch the sermon series as it's unfolded and kind of see what we were talking about there. But with this in particular, with chapter 14, Paul has some really interesting things to say. So chapters 12 and 13 have really been about the individual. What do you do as an individual to be a righteous person? Chapter 14, right? So not to get lost in all of this. And again, Paul didn't write with these chapters in mind. He wasn't writing chapter 12 and then chapter 13 the way that maybe, somebody in contemporary settings would write a novel. That's not what Paul's doing. He's writing a letter, and all of it fits together without these chapter distinctions. And what Paul says very importantly here is that you not only have a mission for yourself, right, an intentionality for being an individual, but also for being a part of this covenant people. And so he talks about what it looks like to be in community, right? So in community, people take care of each other. In community, you don't only think about yourself, and he set that up by talking about in chapter 12, what we call chapter 12. He says to live at peace with everybody, right? To act in such a way that you treat other people well. And then in chapter 13, he said, love your neighbor as yourself. Well, what does it mean to love your neighbor? That's the question, that would follow for these ancient people as they read this letter and listen to Paul's writing. What it means is that you take care of each other. You look out for each other. And so in chapter 14, those are some of the things that he talks about. So we're going to get into that. Righteous living means living in community, means taking care of each other, and means treating each other in a certain way. So Paul's got some really important things to tell us in chapter 14, things, frankly, that I think we need to listen to. Too much of American culture, and of course that's where we're based, and so that's kind of the context that I'm going to be speaking into. Too much of our American culture, and it bleeds. Not even just bleeds. I mean, it dovetails. The church culture in America dovetails perfectly with American culture of this individuality of pulling yourself up by your bootstraps, do-it-yourself mentality. You don't need other people. And that couldn't be further from the truth. So chapter 14 is a really important chapter for us to listen to. It's a really, really good chapter to take to heart, to consider, and to think about as we live these Christian lives. And then next week, we're going to end up our time in Romans by looking at chapter 15 and probably taking a little bit from 16 and closing out our study of righteousness in Romans. All right, so chapter 14 this week, give it a read, and I'm looking forward to diving into it with you. So I hope you guys have a blessed rest of the weekend. We'll talk next week.